like women's pink rubber coated insulated water bottle. Like that's my exact product. Now, the more specific you get to the product, the more specific the search is, the lower your search volume is going to be. So what we always look to do on product launches is like we try and find the intersection between good search volume, and good to us is like maybe even a couple thousand, depending on the budget, that also have really good relevancy to the product. Because what you're trying to do is you want to get in front of your exact shoppers. So example would be insulated water bottle is going to be really expensive and not super specific to my product. Like it's kind of specific, but not really specific. I'm trying to say like, okay, where can I start getting super specific to my product, but it's going to have enough search volume that I can get the sales volume that I need. So I would focus more on that versus that I would looking at only search volume. A bit of a technical answer here is we don't quote move them, meaning we're not going to pause the existing keywords. We're simply going to launch them in another match type. Again, make sure to keep the bids lower. Amazon actually, if you read their recommendations, they recommend keeping bids lower on broad and phrase match, even lower than the exact match. When we would launch those is honestly really dependent on performance of the account and availability of the budget. So if you launch a keyword in exact phrase and broad, so you have 50 keywords, right? And you launch them in exact phrase and broad, you technically have, 150 keywords that you've launched. And the potential of broad and phrase to spend could be quite high. So again, you just want to make sure it makes sense. It seems super simplistic, but if you are in a phase where you're struggling to control total ACoS and ACoS, to fix those two numbers, it really means that you have to lower down your ad spend with ideally little to no impact of the total sales or the ad sales in the case of ACoS. If you introduce a whole, again, those 50 keywords in exact phrase and broad, and those you probably need to test and optimize the bids, etc., you're introducing a lot of additional ad spend into the account. So you do want to be aware of that and be careful with that. So that's kind of a benchmark that we use. But overall, I would say, I don't know if I would have like a certain time frame or a frame which I would hold back on. It really is dependent on the performance of the account. Another good question, which best bid strategy for phrase and exacts when you move? So again, we don't really move them. We would simply launch them in addition. We like to separate them by campaign as well. It gives us a little bit more control over, say, budgets for things. Now, as far as the bidding strategy, we're a super huge fan of using mainly dynamic down only. If it is a keyword that we want to ensure that we get impressions for, so for our launch keywords, for our main keywords, for anything we're trying to be aggressive with, we prefer a fixed bidding strategy. It's still going to be the same. It's still going to be pick highly relevant keywords. One other tip is pick keywords that fit within the budget of the account that you're launching. So for instance, if I have a couple $100 a day budget versus $50 a day budget, those launches are actually going to look a little bit different because I can't afford that many clicks on a $50 a day budget. Or if I had, a couple $100 or $1,000, I have a lot more room for clicks. So actually, you want budgets to play into your launch strategy. The other thing that you want to keep in mind, do not expect profitability on launch. This is a huge one. There's a lot of people that try and pull back and knee-jerk for profitability right out of the gate. That is not going to happen. The reason why it's not going to happen, and I'll tell you the numbers behind the numbers, is that ACoS is just going to be high on your product launches, and that is a function of two things. One, the aggressive cost per click you have to set to be able to get visibility in the beginning, and two, how low your product conversion rate is going to be, especially if you're launching without reviews. Those two things, once you start to be able to bring your cost per clicks down because you gain momentum or you're optimizing your bids, and then two, once your product conversion rate starts to increase because you're getting those reviews, maybe you're optimizing your listing a little bit more because you've learned more about your target market, that is going to help bring down your target ACoS. So those things, again, conversion rates are going to be low, high cost per click. That's actually like the nuts and bolts of why your ads are not profitable, and it's almost unreasonable to expect profitability in the beginning. And that's actually why, if you've ever had a product where you're like, no matter what I do, I cannot seem to bring the ACoS down, I'm struggling here, it's a function of that your conversion rate is remaining low and it's not improving, and your cost per clicks are remaining high and you're not able to improve them due to the market or something else. So again, I would still say pick highly relevant keywords, Also, make sure that whatever keywords that you have fits within your budget. Launch them. Aggressive, sponsored product, exact match, potentially sponsored brand video, exact match if you have the creative. Double down on that for a couple weeks and then start expanding from there. Hello, and welcome back to another segment of Ask Junglr. I appreciate anyone who is already listening in and all of those who are going to be joining shortly. If this is your first time, I want to welcome you. And it looks like we also have some returning viewers as well. So format of this, if you are unaware, the way that this works is you show up, use the comment section, ask an Amazon ad question, and I will give you the best answer I can. The reason why this works is because Amazon advertising is constantly moving. There's so many things and factors that you need to be aware of, and my goal is to help you understand how to best use ad strategy based on your specific problem or whatever it is that you're facing in your account. Or if you just have a question as to like, how does this one specific thing work? Feel free to drop those in the comments as well. Why are we here talking about Amazon advertising? Because that is our bread and butter. That is what we do. So we run Amazon ads so you can run your business. What does that mean? So we work with a lot of what we call founder-led brands, meaning brands that oftentimes start native on Amazon, although most of them have grown to the point where they're also running, other channels as well. But with Amazon advertising, you really need to make sure you're being strategic. And so these brands, it's not like you're going enterprise. It's not like you can throw $10,000, $20,000 at it and say, hey, that's my ad budget for the month. Let's see what happens with the ROI and we'll adjust from there. Or let's see what ROAS we can get and let's adjust from there, right? We work with a couple of those brands. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just saying if you are growing off of your own bottom line and your own cash flow, you need to have a long-term strategy approach so you don't sacrifice market share for short-term goals. And yet you still got to pay attention to what your bottom line is doing today. So the way that you would factor in those things into your ad strategy, that is what we focus in on. What is going on with the ads? What do we need to have the brand? What is the brand missing? And then how can we make sure that we're working towards that in whatever we're doing with the ads? And so with that being said, it looks like we already got a couple questions in the chat, which is awesome. I'll pull those up. I'll make sure that those get answered. One thing, if you're just joining in, one thing that I found is that oftentimes in the beginning, there's not a lot of questions. And then towards the end, oftentimes I'll get like rapid fire questions. And so the sooner you drop your ad question into the chat, the better, because if we hit the cutoff time, I'll be here for an hour. So I'm going to be here for a while. I got you. But if you ask like at the very end, at 12:59, you probably won't get your question answered and you have to show up again next week. So just an FYI. All right, awesome. Fazil saying happy to be here. Happy to have you. Welcome. I appreciate you joining. All right, so Can says we have an account that we manage in Germany. All right, German market. Awesome. One problem is that the campaigns spend a lot of money until 5 to 6 p.m., but there's no conversions generate. I'm wondering if lowering the bids in the morning would increase them in the evening will be effective, or should I affect the algorithm in a bad way? So that is a good question. What I would say is, how are you figuring out that your problems, like that your account is spending a lot of money and yet not making sales? Like, what kind of data points are you looking at? So I'll tell you the data points that are not good to look at that could lead you to wrong conclusions. And then I'll tell you like how you could look at data points that would be like a little bit more accurate. And so sometimes what will happen is you might be looking inside of Campaign Manager. I've seen some sellers do this because when you hit refresh on Campaign Manager, like the spend data updates. There is stuff that updates, right? But one thing to be really aware of is that Campaign Manager data is not real time. So apologies if you are like checking other data sources. For anyone listening in, Campaign Manager data is not real time. And if you're trying to use insights from Campaign Manager to identify like when the spend and sales are really happening, and make sure you're optimizing for that, you're going to be going to incorrect conclusions. Other things that you could look at. So one thing is that daily, like in the business reports. So if you go into business reports and you can like track when the sales naturally increase over the day. Now you have to be looking at today's data in business reports to like really see that timeline. But sometimes you can get a gauge for like when sales start to come in. That one's not like foolproof because it's not going to be looking at like advertising, but it will kind of give you an idea of like when the main purchases are happening. The other thing that you do want to be aware of is that when it comes to advertising, your sponsored product ads are going to have a 7-day sales attribution window, and your sponsored display ads are going to have a 14-day sales attribution window. And oftentimes what shoppers will do, myself included, I'm notorious for this, is we'll go through, we'll search, maybe we'll find an ad, we'll add it to our cart, and then like almost forget about it, and then go back in and be like, oh yeah, I totally meant to purchase. I can't tell you how many times I've added something to my cart. I thought I purchased it and I didn't. And I go back when I am looking for something else on the platform and like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. I didn't even order. And then I'll like order them together, or I'll almost use my cart as like a wish list and then just kind of figure out if I'm going to go and purchase it. So that being said, I do want to preface anything I'm going to give you advice on after this is like, be aware of like consumer behavior, and when the purchases actually happen may not be within the time frame in which they've clicked on your ad or discovered it. So there's very real scenarios where, you know, same day clicks won't lead to same day orders, but they will lead to future orders. And that is the way that Amazon has chosen to do their sales attribution windows. So if you're looking at like inside the ad console and you're looking at like ACoS, total ACoS, and all those. Okay. That was a whole preface. How do you track it? Okay. So I mentioned business reports, right? That's when the actual sales are happening. The other thing that you can pull is inside your reporting, I believe it's only for sponsored product reporting, although you can check the reporting for sponsored brands and display ads as well. But if you look at a sponsored product campaign manager report, you can, on the date ranges, so you'll select whatever date range, and then you'll say like the date range, so you could do like monthly, weekly, or daily. That report allows you to pull hourly data. Now, this hourly data is going to be at the campaign level, so you're not going to see like all the way broken down to like, say, a keyword level or something. But what you can do is you can take this hourly data and you can run a pivot table on it. So you want to make sure that you have enough data here. You don't want to optimize like off of data where you only have like 1 or 2 clicks. So you probably want to select like a longer date range and then use a pivot table off of that to really get enough aggregate data to say, when are people clicking? Like, when is my spend happening? So that oftentimes what we'll look at is primarily the conversion rates for the different times. This is what we found to be the most helpful. And again, to get conversion rates, you have to calculate clicks, or orders divided by clicks. You need enough orders, you need enough clicks to really get an accurate conversion rate, right? If it's 1 order, 1 click, that's 100%, excuse me, that's 100% conversion rate, and guarantee you're not going to scale and see it have 100% conversion rate. So you just be aware of the data that you're actually going after. But that is going to give you real insights to say, okay, so when am I spending the most, and like when are the conversions actually happening? And then again, that whole dynamic I told you before about like shoppers waiting to purchase, be aware of it. So if you do all this data analysis and you say, does it make sense to test these things? I would say what we've observed, as long as you're accurately like looking at the actual data, not like assuming or feeling, as long as you're doing the data analysis and you're like, it seems to me that there's a very clear time frame in which it would make sense. In that case, what we do is, again, lowering bids. So you can do a couple things. There's just pausing stuff. And then the second one is going to be lowering and increasing bids. So what we'll do is we potentially lower bids. But then the other thing that can be helpful is making sure that you have more aggressive bids on the time frames that you have better conversion rates. And then what you want to do is obviously track over time. are you noticing an issue where orders went down or sales went down, or obviously, ideally things are increasing? And then just track your main metrics and make sure, okay, so my assumption was that I was getting more purchases, but again, those purchases, they could be clicking and finding your product, not necessarily the times where they're actually purchasing. So just be careful and make sure that after you set it up, you're really watching it and making sure that your tests are in fact working. All right. Thanks for helping. Of course, it is my pleasure. Great learning and problem solving. Is it possible to run product targeting campaigns using sponsored display or sponsored brand ads on a specific ASIN PDP pages only? So for sponsored display ads, yes. Sponsored display ad product targeting will primarily show you on product pages. You can actually validate this by going and pulling a sponsored display. I want to say it's called matched targeting report. And so in those cases, yes, you can, ASIN targeting primarily will show you up on the product pages. For sponsored brand ads, you can target ASINs. However, what we found, and again, you want to validate this using the search term reports for sponsored brand ads, is that product, or actually if you go inside the ad console, the sponsored brand ads will also have a search tab as well. So that's like really, I like to use the search term tab as like a quick spot check. And then we use like the downloads or, we have tools that can like pull in all of that to, do like a really large, like full scale account analysis. But for spot checks, you can just use the search term tab. Anyways, what we have found is that for sponsored brand ads, product targeting pulls a lot of keyword targeting. There's actually not as much product page placements for sponsored brand product targeting. The additional obnoxious thing about sponsored brand product targeting is that because these campaigns are product targets and you can't negate keywords in product targeting campaigns, you oftentimes end up with a bunch of waste in these campaigns. And really, there's no way to add the negatives. You can pretty much stare at it, be super pissed off about it, and have very little to nothing you can do about it, other than just making sure that you are adjusting the bids based on the aggregate performance of that particular target. That's really the only way to control it. So for that reason, if I would probably test it if I really wanted to go aggressive, but I would be very careful and just be aware of those kind of issues. Looks like we got more people joining, which is awesome. Going to do a quick hello again. So my name is Elizabeth Greene, co-founder of an Amazon ad agency called Junglr, which is why we're here talking about advertising today, specifically Amazon advertising. So the format of this is feel free to drop your Amazon ad question into the chat. You can drop as many questions as you want. If I say something you want me to clarify, or you have a follow-up question on it, feel free to drop those in the chats as well. I'm going to go through them in the order in which they're received. However, if I do get a question that is not specific to Amazon ads, there is a possibility that I will pass it over in favor of the advertising questions, just a quick PSA. But otherwise, I'm going to get back into answering questions because we got them rolling in today, which is awesome. All right. My sponsored brands for winter clothing on Amazon USA is getting both impressions and purchases. When I use the same targets as SP exact match advertising some products, I get fewer impressions. That's not abnormal. So I would say if you're getting fewer impressions, one, just recognize that there's fewer ad spots in sponsored brand ads. So you're just naturally going to have less impressions than a sponsored product ad. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I get less sponsored brand. The only difference, the only reason why your sponsored brand ad might get more impressions than a sponsored product ad was if your sponsored product ad wasn't showing top of search and then your headline was always showing top of search. Well, then every single page load, you're going to get an impression on your sponsored brand ad, but because you don't have high placement for the sponsored product ad, you wouldn't get it. So I wouldn't worry about impressions. If you're making, if you're getting impressions and purchases, awesome. I would say roll with it. You want to adjust each ad based on its individual performance. All right. I'd like to ask about optimizing PPC campaigns. Do you recommend a specific day each week for campaign adjustments, or do you have other criteria for optimizing them? Yes. So a good rule of thumb is you want to adjust bids. We typically say minimum twice a week. You can adjust more than that. I wouldn't adjust more than daily. Unless you're doing like that day parting that I talked about in a previous one, unless you're testing some sort of day parting and intentional strategies, we found that, just adjusting more often, just for whatever reason, doesn't really necessarily make sense. There are very limited use cases where you have crazy aggressive spend. That's normally brands that are literally spending like thousands of dollars a day on one specific keyword. It happens. Not everybody's doing it, but there are those who are. In those cases, you obviously want to make sure that you are looking at that daily and maybe even adjusting more frequently than that. So it goes back to goals. So say bids a couple times a week. You want to make sure you're looking for negatives minimum once a week. You want to make sure that you are identifying and adjusting budget minimum once a week. You want to make sure that you are analyzing your placement percentages and making sure nothing's getting away from you minimum once a week. The other thing that I would say is you want to make sure that you are spot checking the account daily. When I say spot checking, I mean someone is going in, and you want to look at all of the major factors being total sales, ad spend, ad sales, total A costs are good benchmarks. There's obviously plenty more that you can look at, but those I would say are the primary ones. And you want to make sure that nothing is an outlier. So did all the spend tank or something, right? Or did spend exponentially increase? Did sales take a massive hit? All of those things that potentially could go awry. You want to absolutely make sure that you have eyes on the account every single day. And you're not only looking for what happened, yesterday versus day before, you also want to look at the trend lines. So you want to look at trends in total sales. You want to look at trends in total spend. You want to look at trends in ad sales, A costs, total A costs. If you are checking those daily and looking for outlier days and also trend lines, then you're going to spot what's going on the account really fast. And in those cases, what you would do is say, oh, total sales are down. Okay. And then you go into troubleshooting mode and you identify where those changes are coming from. And then you would make additional optimizations to help for, whatever those outlier cases may be. But otherwise, it's pretty much business as usual, which would be minimum the things that I just told you. All right, reading data for purchases in SQP, more accurate or campaign manager? SQP shows 50 total purchases for our brand. Campaign manager shows 22 for our brand. Even with a 25% return rate, this is high. Yes, I've covered this before. So SQP data is not more accurate and campaign manager data is not more accurate. It's each order's time frames, how they're calculated, are defined differently. And so not one is wrong or right. They're different. Sponsored product ads or your campaign manager is the orders are going to be showing the data only from ads. So it's not going to factor in any of the organic sales, which Search Query Performance Report is going to. And then it's also going to have a different date range. So for sponsored product ads, if somebody clicks and purchases within a 7-day window, that click is going to be, that sale is going to be attributed to when the click happened. Now, with Search Query Performance, it only includes search grid clicks and purchases. What are search grids? Search grid is basically the placements for like sponsored product ads. You know how there's that grid that happens on the search page, which means it doesn't include headlines. It doesn't include the widgets. So, like the 4 stars and above groupings or any of those sponsored placements doesn't include that. Doesn't include the video ads, doesn't include et cetera, et cetera. So only if they view and click on the search grid will it be counted. The other thing that it only looks at is it only looks at a 24-hour attribution window, which would mean that if somebody has to see click, and then add to cart purchase of the product within a 24-hour window. Which means if somebody like clicked, added, saw, clicked, added to cart, and then went on and purchased it tomorrow, that order, everything else would have been included in search query performance, but that order wouldn't have been included. So it's not that they're like one is better or different or one is more accurate or different. It's just they're calculated differently. They have different timelines. And so whenever looking at those things, you want to make sure that you're I guess you just kind of understand the data points that you're looking for. If you have a specific question on like what makes sense or how to look at it, or if there's some other data point you're trying to figure out based on search query performance, let me know, and I'll definitely answer that question. They're saying hello. We got more people joining saying hello, so welcome. Again, I said it before, if this is your first time, the format for this is drop an Amazon ad question into the chat, and I will make sure to give you an answer. I'm going to be here for another solid 40 minutes, so we got time. All right, another one, winter close. Let's see. We already answered that one. Losing my place. Here we go. All right, I have 5 Glide products with exact match with Target winter gloves men and winter gloves for men. Will Amazon show one product only, or does it show 2 of my products for the search query? It depends if they are on separate listings. If your products are on a variation listing, then it will only show one of the variations. You're only eligible for one ad spot per variation. If they are on separate listings, it is possible for both products to show up. However, if they are in the same campaign, it doesn't always trigger both products. So we always recommend having separate campaigns for products that are on different listings. There are some very specific reasons, and some other brands that I've talked to and consulted with, I'm like, all right, here's an outlying use case scenario in which maybe it makes more sense to group the products. But I would say across the board, as a general rule of thumb, it's always best to have separate campaigns for products that are on different listings. All right, during this holiday season, we've been seeing a lot of clicks in our PPC campaigns. Can you share some tips on how to optimize these campaigns specifically? Would you recommend adjustments on a daily or hourly basis? Daily at maximum, unless you are spending like say thousands of dollars on one specific target. In terms of timeline, it depends on like how many clicks you're getting. So an example would be, say you have one keyword that only gets like 1 click every 3 weeks, right? You probably don't want to adjust that daily, right? You're not getting enough clicks to do so. So it was just going to be good bid optimizations. The one thing that we do find is that when you're looking at what time frame are you looking back on for your optimizations, you want to make sure that you're looking at shorter date ranges, which is typically, so we do like 14 days or 7 days, depending. There is very specific use cases in which you would want to do like say last 2 to 3 days. The very specific use cases for those would be, so an example is that we have a client that has a very, it's a holiday specific product. We're being very intentional with how aggressive we're being. And so in those cases, we're going back and we're looking at like last 2 to 3 days because we're being very aggressive and we want to make sure that we're ramping up our spend and our impressions and those things. So we need to look at like shorter date ranges to validate that. Otherwise, you should be good to probably optimize off of probably about 7-day window at this point. And then, I mean, like if you're getting all the clicks, it's just, it's the buckets, right? So when you're optimizing your bids, the primary things you'll probably be doing this time of year is optimizing your bids and optimizing your budgets. Is it really working and driving sales? Am I super profitable? AKA lower A costs, increase. Is it not profitable? Am I spending a lot, getting a lot of clicks and no sales? Then you're going to decrease. And so I don't know how tactical that was. If you have any other like more specific tactical questions, let me know. All right, Joseph, how many keywords per campaign and how many campaigns or ASIN are you going to have? So I would say how many campaigns is really going to be dependent on the product. We're not so worried about like, oh, must have 10 campaigns for these products, must have like 20 campaigns for these products, that kind of stuff. We find that that's really a recipe.
Okay, so what I will say this is the level at which we in our agency execute strategy, I do recognize that like the difficulty is I'm not going to give you a hard and fast must launch 10 campaigns for these. You need to have these 5 campaigns, like that kind of stuff, which I understand there's oftentimes a frustration with sellers when like not having those very concrete answers. My goal here is to give you enough information that you could execute your strategy at the level at which we execute strategy. I'm going to preface this by saying it's not a defined thing. That being said, oftentimes for individual products, if the product can support the level of ad spend that we really want to push towards it, we're probably going to end up with somewhere between 10 to 20 campaigns or even more. We've had some product lines where there's like hundreds of campaigns for that individual product, but that one product was driving like 80% of the business. So it warranted that kind of structure in that ad spend. As far as how many keywords per campaign, I've been talking through this recently. I don't have a hard or fast rule. The reason being is because I've seen forcing a hard or fast rule just like it's not operating at the level of quality that I would require. So I could give you like a no more than 5, no more than 10, no more than 20, right? These numbers have been thrown around. To be honest, the numbers are super arbitrary. That's one of the things I'm ranting here, but like that is one of the things that like I do have a real frustration with our industry because everyone wants these and I'm not yelling at you, Joseph. I'm trying to add context to my answer. Is like everybody wants these very safe buckets, but confining yourself to those safe buckets oftentimes does harm to accounts, is what I've seen. And so the way I would think about it, Joseph, is I would think about in levels in terms of strategy and in terms of where you found the keyword set. So the way that we group campaigns and why we end up with so many campaigns is we bucket our campaigns based on a couple different things. One is by listing. So I kind of touched on this in one of my other answers. I'm going to, if I have products that are on separate listings, even if they share keywords, I'm going to create separate campaigns for those. So they already have 2 campaigns instead of just throwing them into one, even if they share keywords. Then I'm going to further bucket out that keyword set by where did I find these keywords and what is my goal for these keywords. An example would be maybe I did keyword research using helium-10. So that's my group. I got my list. But I have these 3 keywords that I really want to drive rank on. So that's a goal, rank. Bucket these out. So that's 2 campaigns instead of throwing them all in together. See how this starts to break down? And then I might have done some keyword research and maybe I found more keywords, but these are around a very specific search cluster. So search cluster might be like, say I'm selling cups and I found a bunch of keywords that have the root word, plastic drinking cup in them. That's a bucket and that's a segment. So, hey, I'm going to bucket these. I'm going to segment these. And so as you go through and as you think through these intentional segmentations, you will naturally end up with 1, more campaigns. And then 2, you're going to start limiting the number of keywords that you put into your campaigns. The other thing that we found useful is whenever we identify a new keyword grouping that we want to test, we will always create a new campaign for it. The reason why is that if I just take my keywords and I throw them in with something that's already existing, or even if I throw into an existing ad group, 1, I kind of degrade the structure of that campaign because I always wanted a single campaign, single ad group, if at all possible. And then the other thing that it will do, so that's going to naturally create more. So if I don't want to lump them in together and I want to keep them separate, I want to keep those strategies just really, really clean, then I'm naturally going to end up with more campaigns. So you can see naturally why that will just lead you to limit the number of campaigns or the number of keywords naturally in your campaign. And that will lead you to like kind of identify how many campaigns you're going to have. So how many campaigns you have is just going to be like how many different strategies are you running for that product? And when you're trying to figure out how many different strategies are you running, it's like, how many strategies can the ad spend that I have for this product support? And then you start with the ad strategies that are the most important, those being ranking and low cost profitable traffic. So like your low bid autos, your broad match, those kind of things. And then like your exact match, more aggressive strategies. So that's like your core. And then you go, oh, this is doing really well on product pages. Okay, let me add that in. Oh, wait, this is doing really phenomenal on this one specific keyword search. Are there other keywords like it I could test? Okay, so there's a long tail variation search. Oh, wait, this long tail is like working really well. Oh, wait, there's this other keyword cluster. Okay, add that. Like you're building. So again, it doesn't give you a defined list. But what I found is like hyper focus on defined lists. Again, I should be better at just like, hey, here's these 5 things to launch. But like, I don't know. I know at the level in which we execute, and my goal is to have my answers to you all help you sort of understand how to build that, if that makes sense. All right. In response to query, spending time a day. What do I do is half the day limit and then run budgets on target segmentation for larger parts of the day? Am I doing it right? Yep. So that's another way to do it. So that was the question on like day parting. So there's, I guess, 3 ways you could do day parting. One of them is going to be like just pausing reactivating the campaign. So like shutting ads off, turning ads on. That one tends to be a little bit more extreme. The other way you can do it is like decreasing bids and then increasing bids during peak times. And then another third way, which I appreciate you answering this, is like you can segment the budget. So you could say, all right, I'm going to limit the budget in the day. Like I'm still going to spend, but then I'm going to add more budget during peak times. You could do it that way as well. All 3 of them technically work. I would say the bids and the budget goal, like, turning things down, turning them off versus pausing and unpausing, that tends to give you, it's more of a dial, which you can play with, which is on or off, is a little bit more extreme, but sometimes warranted. The only thing I would say is that for any sort of day parting, you definitely want to make sure that you are optimizing, or like you make sure the data supports testing day parting. For home furnishing category, products, bolster, cushion covers, having a decent ACOS last month had a bad impact in this particular month. What should I do in this case? All right, let's see if I can understand. So for furnishing category, having a decent ACOS last month and it had a bad impact. So it sounds like my clarifying question to you would be, when you say it had a bad impact, does that mean like ACOS is bad this month, or you focused on a low ACOS and that led to really bad total sales this month? I'm going to try and answer the question how I understand it, which is I think you mean bad ACOS this month or a higher ACOS this month, but feel free to clarify. So what you want to do whenever you have like good performance and then bad performance, or vice versa, sometimes something was performing bad and something was performing good, you want to identify why. How you identify why is you identify the marked point in change. So when did stuff start going wrong? And then when stuff started going wrong till now. So what's the date range I'm looking at? And then what I want to do is I want to take that same date range and I'm going to look at it prior. So you want to you're comparing apples to apples, these two. And then you want to figure out, so when it comes to ACOS and changes in ACOS, it's going to be 2 things. One, it's either going to be spend went up or sales went down, or maybe a mixture of both, because ACOS is ad spend divided by ad sales, right? So what's the difference? All right, so if it's that ad sales, maybe ad spend remained the same, sales went down. I want to figure out why. So now I'm going to say, where were most of my sales coming from last month, and where are they not? And what was the change in that? If it's spend went through the roof, sales didn't, then I'll say, where did that spend increases happen? And then I'll say, okay, so spend increases happen, and it was on these 3 campaigns. Okay, what is going on in those 3 campaigns? I want to look at the products. Which products had more spend? Are there different ad groups? Which ad group have? And you look at the bigger picture, identifying the number that you need to figure out. You need to troubleshoot. Zoom in to where that issue happened, ideally all the way down to a search term level. And then you should have a really good idea. So it's like, oh, this one search term used to be performing and now it's not. Or, oh, this product used to be active and now that product's no longer active. And that's where all the, sales were coming from, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to look at points of change and then follow that rabbit hole down to the conclusion of what happened. All right, my question on search query versus campaign manager. If I want to elevate purchases against keywords, would not mind if the sale happened outside of search query performance window. So I tend to prefer campaign manager, right? Again, I wouldn't take one or either. So what we found that search query performance report is insanely powerful for, and this is how we use it, is you can look at how your products compare to the market on a search query level. It's powerful. Why search query performance is so powerful and completely blew everybody's minds is that Amazon will let you know how you're doing versus your competitors on an individual search term level. It's insane. So what you want to do whenever you're trying to push a product for rank, you want to say, hey, my goal is to outpace the market. One of the ways I need to outpace the market is in my conversion rates and maybe my click-through rates. So what we'll use search query performance for is we'll look at a specific product and we'll say, hey, which search queries or so which shopper searches do we perform better? Where do we have better conversion rates? And then where is a lot of shopper search happening? So you want to look at the places where there's a lot of searches and then where we have a competitive advantage. And then we can use ads to hammer through on those specific search pages. So again, I wouldn't do one, or I wouldn't only use one. I would say, where does this information fit into my goals? And then I would optimize for that. So your campaign manager data is going to be the best use to understand what's going on with your advertising, right? You can't use search query performance information to understand your advertising and what's going on with the individual campaign or a strategy or something. But you can't only use campaign manager data to understand your market competitiveness and your market trends. So again, just understand when each is what's the best use case for each data set and then use it in that way. All right. Recently, I saw a video of adjusting bids on revenue per click. Want to understand what is the correct way to adjust bids. If you have a target ACoS in mind, which target for clients to achieve? All right. Looks like we got another question. Okay. I could get into bid optimization. It is a very powerful tool. So revenue per click model is a great way to identify what does my bid need to be to hit the target ACoS? It's mathematics. It's all right, if my conversion rate's this, so you take whatever your sales data is, you multiply it by whatever your target ACoS is, so 30%, 20%, 25%, and then you divide it by how many clicks that keyword got. And then you say, all right, what's the bid? The issue with this is that one of the things that you need to completely understand is that although the mathematics are often sound, if my bid is X, I will hit this target ACoS. That logic is sound. But what it's not factoring in is saying, what is the market requiring? If your revenue per click optimization is telling you, your bid calculation is telling you, I can only afford to spend 25 cents, and the average cost per click for that keyword is $1, you can put 25 cents. Amazon's not going to give you very many impressions, if at all impressions, at the 25-cent bid. So what do you do? Well, what we found is that there's 4 buckets that every single keyword is going to fall into. And then what you need to do is optimize those buckets based on your, whatever the strategy is. So the buckets are above target ACoS, below target ACoS, clicks with no sales, and low or no impressions. Basically, no impressions. Every single keyword that you have is going to fall into those 4 buckets. Now, here's what you need to be aware of is there's a couple ways that you want to filter how you're going to adjust the keywords in this buckets, because like across the board, what needs to happen? So in the above target ACoS bucket, lower a bid. In the below target ACoS bucket, you typically raise the bid. In the clicks with no sale keywords, you're pretty much going to lower them. And in the no impressions bucket, you're going to increase them. So those are like your 4 buckets and your 4 action items. The question you need to ask yourself is by how much? So here's how we would do it. So there's a couple different models out there. There's like the revenue per click model. Sean Smith also has a really great one called the G formula. We use both, to be honest. But what you want to do is you want to calculate, okay, where would I need to end up at? So you can use the revenue per click. We can go back to that where I have a $1 bid. And then my formula is telling me I got to jack it down to 25 cents. I'm like, I got to jack it down 75 cents. That's a lot, right? So what we do is we will say, what is the order impact of this target? Because if you've been in ad management for any length of time, you often find that you will, sometimes you do this, you go and you make all the quote right decisions, right? You can go into an account and you can apply a revenue per click model just like across everything. And you're like, you know what, screw it. Everything's getting a revenue per click bid adjustments. Oftentimes ACoS goes up. Oftentimes those optimizations are like, just like everything goes to crap. And you're like, why? I applied something that was mathematically sound. The reason is it didn't factor in the market. So what I would recommend doing is you can use any base bids, you know, revenue per click, G formula, all of those. It's like, all right, this is where I need to optimize my bids to. And then what we'll do is we will tweak that output based on the impact it has on orders. We also factor in the match type, and we will factor in, I think it's mostly that. And we'll also factor in like how important this target is. So an example would be like a ranking target. We're like, well, it's above target ACoS, but like we're already ranking on this keyword. We've identified it helps us increase market share. We're going to allow that ACoS. It's kind of what you're doing. So you're balancing it out by tweaking your allowances for certain things, if that makes sense. So how you would tweak the allowance, I'll give you a really like basics. It's how much order volume is this driving? Be careful only by looking at order volume because you will naturally like favor broads and autos. Been there, done that. Not a good idea. So you just want to have that additional layer in there. And then what you want to do is say, okay, so revenue click told me it was 25 cents. But you know what? This is a super important keyword to me. I know my target ACoS is 25%. I'm going to put a like a filter, I forget the wording we use. It's almost like a floor. So when I'm lowering things, I'm putting floors. When I'm increasing things, I'm putting ceilings. And you're going, okay, so I know the model tells me I need to adjust for this, but because this is a very important strategic keyword for me, I'm not going to lower it beyond, you could do like, it depends. There's all kind of models that would test them. So I'm not going to lower it any lower than like 10 cents below whatever my bid already is. I'm not going to lower it beyond 20% decrease. I'm not going to lower it below X amount versus the cost per click, whatever it may be. I will tell you that the more important the target is to your strategy and the more important the target is to your market share, the more careful you should be about very aggressive. And when I say aggressive, I mean like very large decreases. The less important that keyword is to like your overall strategy, you might be like, screw it, apply revenue cost per click. I don't need you. So that is the way that we do it. You might have follow-up questions on that because that was a little bit long, but hopefully it was helpful. Does increasing bids on placements when you're falling down bid be done in home furnishings or India? Should we keep a different bid? Seems like this is a very long. I'm not sure if this is related to your last question. Placement percentages are very helpful. What I would say the way that we use placement percentages is to maximize the performance of things that are already working. I'm not a huge fan of like just aggressively applying a whole bunch of placement percentages because I haven't ever seen that work really well. So read the data, understand how you can, work towards further increases, and then do that. This one I'm not really sure. Do you think holistically at brand level promoting winter a writer book's worth it? You're never profitable in the niche, just get relevant clicks. I'm not quite sure of the question. If you want to re-ask that with more clarity. If you're talking about advertising books are historically like really hard and typically have very like crazy high costs, which is pretty normal. So on a new product launch, if I'm not covering any primary keywords, should I still run ranking campaigns? Because one doesn't want to be seen on the primary keyword search pages, conversions or no. I mean, so are you not going after the primary keywords because I guess I don't fully understand the question or why you wouldn't go after, unless if I'm not so if you're not converting on primary keywords, you're still running making campaigns. Your goal in a product launch is to discover a couple things. One, where do I get sales for this product? Where is it, right? We have our theories, so that's why we do really solid keyword research. We find the primary keywords, we find the specific keywords, we find where our product fits into the market, and then we say, here market, here is the product, please buy it. And the market will tell you. The market will either say, hey, thank you very much, I like your product, I'm going to purchase it, or the market will click on your product and be like, nope, not interested, right? Either way, you figured something out. So if the thing that you think should work doesn't work, it never makes sense to continuously throw money at something that you've already proven doesn't work. Now, definitely investigate, figure out why. You want to look at things like your conversion rate. You can look at search query performance report. You want to understand like, is there a way that I can tell through data? PickFu is a fantastic way. We've been helping a lot of our clients by running PickFu polls on main images to be like, hey, what does the market think of this? PickFu is a fabulous way to be like, hey, market, what do you think of this product? So you definitely want to query and try to understand to the best of your abilities why a product may not be working. But the thing is, if you've proven that it doesn't really make sense to continuously throw money at that. So whenever our theories and what we thought should work didn't work, we always zoom out and then we say, all right, is there anywhere that some of our ads are working? And what we mean by working in this case, if it's a product launch, is like, is there any way we're making orders? That might be through broad match. That might be through auto campaigns. It might be on a keyword that we never in a million years would have thought worked for the product, but it does. There's all kinds of things like that. There's been certain like accounts we're in where like category targeting is the only thing that works for whatever reason. I don't know. I just know that it did work because I can read the data. And so you just want to and if you haven't found anything that worked, that you haven't found anything that drove orders, you want to continuously try different things until you do. Oftentimes in those categories, it can be really difficult to like aggressively test a lot of exact match because there's so many different shopper variations of keywords. But I recommend often in those scenarios moving on to testing auto and broad match and those kind of things to see if you can identify where the products convert in the market. Again, that's not like the best launch strategy. It's definitely like specific keywords, exact match keywords, aggressive, all of that thing. But when that strategy doesn't work, you definitely need to pivot. So the goal is test what you have figured out is like the most universal thing that works, which it sounds like you've done. And then when it doesn't work, you pivot till you find something that does drive. When I say quote works, again, I'm talking about is actually getting orders for the product. And then you say, okay, I know this works. What can I understand more about how to do more of this thing? So an example would be, say you did the main keywords, those aren't converting. You're like, crap. Okay, so let me go do markets. All right, let me take a look. Okay, wait, there's something in the auto. So the auto campaign is working. Great. How do I figure out how to do more of that? Well, I'm going to go look at the search terms. So I'm going to look at the search terms and go, oh, that's interesting. So every time I have these keywords, they're not working. But you know what? These products are working really well. Okay, cool. So how do I do more of that? Well, I'm going to reverse ASIN search those products. Where are these products showing up? Maybe that can do some interesting keyword research. I'm going to take the same product and I'm going to put it in an ASIN and expanded ASIN targeting. Because I know this is me telling Amazon, hey, I need you to go and find me more products like this. I might go and say like, well, let me try running a sponsored display ad on them because I know I convert when I show up on the search page. Let me double down there. And then you run that data set. So, oh, great. I found more products that I can target. Oh, wait, when I did the reverse ASIN search, this is interesting. They're showing up in this segment of the market. Okay, let me go and test those keywords. And then you just you keep figuring out what's working. And then your goal is to, that's what the real strategy is. Tactics are, there's these 3 campaigns and don't put any more than these X amount of keywords. Those are all tactical stuff, which is not bad to have. But a real strategy and a real tacticianer goes, this is working, great, research to do more. And this is not working, great, why? And you keep shaping ad strategy around what you're finding there. All right, last couple questions. So if you got one more question, I got maybe about 5-10 minutes left, maybe. So we got time for more. But yeah, the question was, books are not profitable on Amazon when optimizing for sales. Is it worth it to just focus on brand awareness and Amazon to get relevant clicks? If yes, what strategy to follow and the main KPIs to track? I would say yes. So the one thing you want to understand, books, to be honest, are very often not profitable. The one thing that we found works really well in books is typically product targeting. So it's like anything. Each category is going to have its nuances. Books being that a lot of the ranking strategies and things are just so expensive, it doesn't make sense. So optimizing for things like brand awareness is great. A lot of low bid auto campaigns, a little bit broad match, again, those kind of supplemental strategies, you might still run another ad products, but again, ranking is a huge thing when it comes to your regular products. Books, again, like you said, it's so crazy expensive that it's just difficult. And so yeah, we'll do it. Product targeting has worked really well. Category targeting can work really well in books. And then any sort of brand awareness searches for authors can be a really great strategy here as well. So you really, again, you want to think a little bit more outside the box with this this kind of ad or this kind of product anyway, would be my recommendation. So anyways, that was awesome. A lot of really fantastic questions, a lot of really tough questions. Hopefully I was able to give you all some fantastic strategies to tackle these kind of things in your account. Again, I always appreciate everybody showing up, asking these questions, because this show would not be possible if you guys weren't here. All right, we got one more. For UAE, daily wear apparel has low keyword search volume. What is the strategy should we follow from markets? Yeah, so a lot of these times, it's just a nuance to the market. There's only going to be so much possible, because if the market's not searching, the one thing with Amazon advertising is you cannot, as much as it is difficult, you cannot generate product demand. All you're doing is harnessing demand that is already existing on the platform. And so when you're on these platforms where there just isn't a lot of demand, it can be really difficult. So what we do is oftentimes, one, again, just do what you can with the search market that's there. The other thing that you can try, but oftentimes you get really high A costs from this kind of strategy, but you can try it, is going to be going after a broader market. Oftentimes, because cost per clicks are a lot lower, you can get away with it, and you might not have as crazy high A costs as you would if you tried the same strategy in the US. But an example here would be, say it's apparel, right? And it might be a men's jogging shirt or something, or maybe athletic wear or something. So maybe normally doing keyword research, then for US, you would be looking at the active wear shirts, so really specific keywords. But if you're trying to get more eyeballs on the product, you might try advertising on a keyword like shirt. If you're talking US market, I would Never recommend that strategy because it's going to be super expensive. Cost per clicks are going to be absolutely crazy. It's not going to work well. Oftentimes, if there's low demand in your very specific search market, you can go outside and go super broad in these other marketplaces where it's not as competitive and the cost per clicks aren't that high. You can still get away with those strategies. Actually, in the beginning, when Amazon first launched their ad platform, that's what sellers were doing because cost per clicks were just so cheap. And so they were able to go over things like shirts, pants, cups, like where those are just so oversaturated, conversion rates are low, it just doesn't make sense in the current US market. But some of these lower volume markets, again, it does make sense. So I would recommend just trying that out and then just recognize you can't grow the market through advertising. You're simply harnessing it. All right. So we're going to wrap it up with a ton of good questions. I always appreciate you all joining as well. So as always, if you've listened in, you're like, hey, this sounds super awesome, but maybe it's a little bit complicated. Or if you have a brand and you're wondering what more you can do to maximize your Amazon advertising, if you would like a very personalized and strategic advertising audit, more than happy to put that together for you. I can walk you through it personally. We'll deep dive into the very specific strategies that I would recommend to help grow your account, again, without sacrificing profitability. So the best place to do that is going to be the website. I would go to junglr.com and sign up today. We'll get you an audit. But otherwise, again, I appreciate everybody joining in here. I will be back here same time, same place next week to answer more of your Amazon ad questions. Thanks, guys.
And that wraps up this episode of the Ask Junglr Amazon Advertising Podcast. I hope you found these insights and strategies helpful in your Amazon PPC journey. Remember, if you have a burning Amazon ad question that you'd like answers to, head over to junglr.com/live to join our next live Q&A session. Until next time, keep optimizing those ads and stay hungry.